Today is October 26th, 1989. We're at the Advent Building, and the Historical Society is presenting a program, Verne Crackel Night. We're going to reminisce about Verne Crackel.
New Hampshire was Great-Grandpa Wood, and it was used in the hotel. Then when my father's father, Grandpa Tom, was at the school before they installed the bell in the first little old school. That was the bell to call the kids to school and then from recess. And I have a little one that matches it.
That's what you call a real Crete artifact.
That's long. That's a lot older.
And we appreciate the use of it tonight. We're gathered tonight for our second annual recognition night. Last year, we honored Hans Clausen, and it was a real successful evening. And when we were talking about it, after the meeting, we decided to make this an annual event, to choose someone from the community every October that had done a lot for this town and this area, that had a special place in the hearts of an awful lot of people in this area. And for this year, our unanimous decision amongst our board of directors and our officers was to honor Verne Crackel. Mr. Crackel was an educator. That's what he did. I think I'm one of the few people here tonight that really didn't know Mr. Crackel personally, and I do regret it because I've heard so much about him, and in preparing for this evening, I've learned an awful lot about what a good educator really is. Mr. Crackel came to Crete in the 20s, and I'm going to ask his daughter to talk about this a little more later. She knows the years that he was here and these things a little better than I do. When he came, he was really a rookie. He started his teaching career as a young man. He had never finished high school. He took the tests necessary to get a teacher's certificate and later went on to get his BA and his MA. He came here and he taught 8th grade math. He served as the custodian when it was necessary. He was the principal of the school. He was the basketball coach. He was a self-appointed truant officer. He was responsible for the high school. Started as a 2-year school and grew to 4 years under his tenure, adding a year at a time. And he was responsible for the Crete-Money 201U unit district, a consolidated school district. Mr. Crackel was at the heart of that campaign. His students are here tonight. Some of his fellow teachers are here tonight. We're glad to see all of you. His daughter, Joyce Fox, and his son-in-law, Glenn Fox, are with us tonight, and we're particularly honored to have them with us. It's a really good feeling to have someone from the family. We're going to just reminisce, and I'm going to have to call on a couple people right here up front in the beginning, I guess, to talk about Mr. Crackel. But then I just hope you'll join in and offer your stories and your reminiscences and all the good feelings about him. He was a wonderful family man, and his love of family came first. His wife Mildred and his daughters, Joyce and Laverne and Judy and Joanne. He was a great lover of his community, active in the community in all kinds of ways, and a great lover of education. We have lots of people who have stories to tell. Leah Ray, I think I'm going to start with you. Leah Ray talked to me about some things that Mr. Crackel did for her and how he encouraged her, and I'd like you to share it with us.
All right.
Okay?
Okay. Well, I graduated from high school and was working at Victor Chemical. And the day before classes started at Eastern University, I said to my parents, I want to go to college. And they called Mr. Crackel, and he saw that I got into Eastern University and was in classes the next day and helped me to get a state scholarship.
It's really incredible because today that's just not possible to do. And to have a teacher take that kind of personal interest in the student. think we're going to hear more of that tonight because personal interests seem to be a keynote of his career. Who wants to chime in here? Winnie?
Me?
Florence?
Well, I started teaching in the high school when it was starting its second year, and that was 1933. And Hazel Gaines and I had both put in applications for one job. Well, Hazel got the job, but it was teaching in grade school. Well, it seemed that they had one more student. If they got one more student in high school, they'd need to hire another teacher. So they had the one more, so they hired me. So I had put in for English, but when I started teaching, I had algebra, I had civics, I had history, anything but English. I didn't teach English my first year. But then the teacher that was teaching English left, so then I stepped into her job, so then I got into my English teaching. But Mr. Crackel was always one that he backed you to the hilt. If you had any problems with your students, he sided with you and you didn't have any more problems. But in those days, you really didn't have too many problems. The kids altogether different from what they are today. And I think maybe much more enjoyable teaching them than the teachers of today would have. I've had a little sampling of that a couple of years ago. I did a lot of subbing, but it's not like teaching regularly. But I always enjoyed, I taught until 1942, and then I got married. So then I was away for a while, and then when I came back, they needed me to step into, I think I taught 6th grade to fill in because they needed a teacher. So I taught that for a year. I don't know, I taught a year or 2 years. But anyway, I always enjoyed the Crete High School because everything went very smoothly with Mr. Crackel. Never had any problems that you couldn't solve quickly. You needed to.
Anybody else? Winnie?
When I think of Verne Crackel, I think of about 3 aspects of his life. We had a bad time when the school burned and we had to go to school in the park, but he was equal to the situation. And no problem. We had no furnace, and sometimes it was mighty cold in there, but it worked out just fine. One time, this is a funny experience, and Ann said tell you about it. He also helped with coaching, and as she had said, he was always the last one to leave that building. I mean, if we girls had basketball practice or what, Mr. Crackel always checked us out. So this particular night, some of us had dallied in there. Remember that funny little shower, a room, some of you, the back of the stage and up the stairs? I think there was one stall. Anyway, we're all up there running around nude, yeah, and then we hear someone coming up and Mr. Crackel. About 5 of us, and I stitched clothes on. Someone didn't know where to go or what to do. And he looked at us and he says, "Oh, you girls are supposed to be out of here." "Yes, sir." He says, "Don't let it bother you." He said, "You don't need to be embarrassed. I have girls at home. I know what it's all about. But let's get our clothes on and get out of here." It didn't take us long. But on a more somber note, whenever the name Verne Crackel is mentioned, and it is often at our house, as we go through pictures and what have you, I can think of no other word that describes a person any better than the word respect. He certainly was respectful, and he commanded our respect. If you were doing something wrong and Mr. Crackel said, "Sit," you darn better well sit. And you didn't argue with him. You didn't zap him. You sat. And then he would explain to you why you were sitting there, and after a while you got to move a little bit. But I don't really think anyone disliked Verne Crackel. My father worked with him on the board, and my dad had the highest respect for Mr. Crackel. And I think it was a mutual thing. And that is what has happened to our world. People like him, and there are some other teachers like that sitting right in this room tonight, who knew what morals were all about and how you handle people. We don't have that anymore, but to me, Verne Crackel is the epitome of a gentleman and a wonderful person, and I cherish and thank the good Lord that I had the privilege of knowing him.
Thank you. That's very nicely put. Mr. Crackel left Crete and went on to even greater achievements. He was active in the county superintendent of schools, I believe. Is that correct, Joyce? And went on to Springfield as well, where he served as the deputy state superintendent of schools. I don't think there are many educators who served here in Crete who have gone quite that far. It was a very illustrious career. But the human aspect of this and the personal stories say even more than just his achievements in terms of his career. Barbara, you were his student, I believe. Did you also teach under him?
Yes, I did.
You did. At the high school?
Junior high and high school. Well, right when he left, I think I was still in the junior.
In the junior.
Went on to the high school.
What was it like as a beginning teacher to come in under someone like Mr. Crackel?
Well, first of all, I can relate so much to what else is being said here, because number one, I would never have gone to college had it not been for Verne Crackel. When I entered my senior year of high school, there were no plans for me to go to college, and then all of a sudden, he was at our house, and he started talking college, and he got scholarship for me, etc. So that changed my plans in a hurry. When I graduated from college, I taught a year in Iowa, and it was a terrible experience under one of the world's worst superintendents. And I had it. I thought, if this is education, I want no part of it. And I came back that summer to kind of rethink what I was going to do with my life, and it certainly wasn't going to be to teach. And here's Verne Crackel on the doorstep again. And he talked to me for quite some time, and I said, Mr. Crackel, I can't even get a reference from this place in Iowa. And he said, I'm not asking for a reference, but he said, I need a teacher. So that's when I started teaching for him, and it was at the junior high level. And the business of respect, I can remember being chewed out by him, both as a student and as a teacher, and it was, yes, sir, yes, sir. Later in life, I got mouthier toward administration. I wasn't at that time. But I think, too, one of the things I enjoyed so much about him was his sense of humor. That first year I taught, he slid a class in on me, as he did before, apparently, and I suddenly discovered I was going to be teaching a class of junior high art. And I didn't know the first thing about teaching art. In fact, I had a hard time with my straight lines. And so he knew I was really agonizing over this, and those poor kids had the longest lesson on printing and on perspective, drawing train tracks. And all of a sudden, he came to me one day and he said, I was at a Lions Club meeting last night. And he said they started talking about the fact that they want signs on either end of town saying, welcome to Crete. And they were talking about who should do this. And I stood up and I said, hey, I've got an art teacher over there in that junior high. And so he volunteered my services. I was so angry and frustrated, I could have cried, I think. But I had a brother who was an engineer. So without telling him, my brother designed the sign. And I took the design into him, and he spent months trying to find out who designed that sign, because he knew that I did. And that was his way of playing a joke, and we ended up with signs over the town.
Well, how nice.
What a
A gentleman and a friend. Those words have been mentioned. He influenced things in your family too, Ed Newton. You said I know your dad worked with him. You want to tell us a little about that?
Well, that would be the very beginning, because that was Depression days, and they were building Exchange Street for the first time. My dad was one that got hurt, wasn't able to work for quite a few years. 7 kids there. It was kind of a tough go, but when the time came around to hire a custodian at the school, Verne Crackel was responsible for my dad getting a job. Needless to say, that's the best thing that ever happened to the family. And it did require a lot of help because my dad being hurt couldn't do it by himself. My father, my mother, my older sister, and myself worked every morning and every night to get the job done. But it was one of the best things that ever happened. And from that point on, my memories of Verne Crackel was that he was very warm, friendly, but as stern as could be. And I think Winnie reiterated all the facts about how he could be. I don't think he had an enemy in the world, maybe for a day, some of the kids. But he was always out there on the ball field protecting the young guys from these big bullies. We had a few there. Hans Clausen's boy and Gibby Nellis. You probably remember, well,
Some things
Joe
never
Laurie would
change.
remember some of those guys out there. And I remember him out there pitching, and we'd be on the sidelines. We could get in there, we would. If it wasn't for Verne, we wouldn't have got in. And to go on, I received letters from Verne Crackel prior to my running for elections each time that I ran. And as I won, I got congratulatory letters back each time. And I have one of them here dated February 26, 1974. He was
Would you like to share it with us?
looking for a little help. Well, it's just a small letter. It says, from the desk of Verne Crackel. Dear Eddie, I was glad to see your name among the Crete Republican committeemen. I am trying to help my personal friend, Mr. Harry Page, in his race for the Republican nomination for state treasurer. I would appreciate any help you can give him in the primary. I believe he is the best candidate to be on a ticket in the fall election. Sincerely, Verne Crackel, address of Joliet. I also have several other letters, one being made citizen the year 1977. And each time after election, I won each time I went out, another letter. I also admired his handwriting. You could read it no matter what, no matter how fast. He wrote fast. He would just run across the page like a typewriter today. But that signature, Verne Crackel, on the bottom of my first grade report card.
That's really a treasure.
Also, I have a picture. He was our basketball coach, 1935, 1936. If anybody would like to see the little skinny runts at that time.
And that was what? That was 5th grade?
Probably.
Yeah, those are the real little kids, the junior whatever team. Yeah. Joyce has brought along some photographs tonight. We're going to take a break a little way into this and give you a chance to have some coffee or some apple cider and something to eat, and give you a chance to look at the pictures here. And after we come back from our break, we're going to ask Joyce to speak about her dad. Who else would like to share something with us? Don't be bashful. Mary Ann.
Well, I'm going to say, and after all these years, it doesn't bother me as much, but when we had a dedication of the gym at the elementary school, I don't remember when it was really, but we sat upstairs in the bleachers. Of course, everybody's sitting there. And one of my classmates, who I want to name because he's not here, Jim Adams, and he was throwing him down. Well, me being this very shy and angelic little girl at that time, sat there when everybody's doing so, I'm doing, and I had just one man sitting down there with a bald head naturally, and I think he's a school board member, I'm not sure. But anyway, it wasn't very nice because, a lot of spitballs were going back down there. Well, Mr. Crackel on Monday morning called an assembly and told us how ashamed he was of how we acted. When I was about one of maybe 15 or 20, but you think I was the only person here because I felt so guilty, I was almost sick, you know, and oh heavens, I didn't want him to ever let my mother and father know anything about this, you know. So you can believe it or not, but I went to his office and I told him that I was doing spitballs. And so then he said to me, you know, he knew I wasn't alone doing it, but nobody else was going to admit it, but I did. I was up because I'm so ashamed of myself. And if I remember correctly, Tom Northern was the one who would get really the ball. Another time, I remember, we had the assembly hall, and who went to, or the, not assembly hall, what do we call that? It used to be the cafeteria, they added the addition alongside the gym. And we used to have our study hours in there. And we had this very young teacher, Miss Norton, who was our, I think, just out of college, I think. And so we'd be sitting there, you know, and I think we were freshmen, because I think we were sophomores, and you were in there too, my classroom. But anyhow, we were sitting there, and the same individual, you know, was always causing trouble. You know, so he went out, and the door was open at the assembly hall, so he went out and picked something out of the yard there, and came by and put it on my desk, and me, you know, thinking maybe I just thought it was a snake, and you know, woo, you know, and who walked in the door but Mr. Crackel, and he said, "Here, a pin drop." And I sat there, you know, like this, and he walked up alongside my desk, and he said, "But Mary Ann, what's the problem?" I said, "Nothing." Why the outburst? I said, "I thought there was something on my desk." I said, "But I guess it's just in for interest." Oh, I tell you what she said. I mean, you know, we just highly respected everything he did. And not to take up the floor, but we ever got a chewing out. We were practicing for graduation. And Will Stagel was valedictorian in class, and I was the valedictorian in class. And we had these speeches to memorize. But a day of rehearsal, neither she nor I knew our speeches. And he was very disgusted. "If you want to get up there," he says, "and make a fool of yourselves, go right ahead." And he walked out of the gym, you know, and here and home. Well, I went home and I studied, and the next morning I went into him and I said, "I know every word." He said, "Well, make sure you know it." Oh, and I just hear a little bit. I have a little note here from Jerry Sharp, who is down in Florida. I wrote and told her we were having this. She said, "I'm very happy and proud to get my word in for one sweet guy, Verne Crackel. As a teacher, he sure put his point across, so one," and she has, quote, "mainly me, never forgot the incident. Asked to read my theme in front of the 8th grade class, I told how I went to the pump to get more water in my bucket and make sure it was fuller. At this point, Mr. Crackel, my teacher, stopped me to say, 'Geraldine, when the bucket is full, it cannot be made fuller.'" I never made that mistake again. A wonderful person and a great educator. George Sharp always remembered Verne teaching the boys soccer. He was ruthless on the field, but how much they respected him, words cannot describe. We both always considered Verne a very dear friend. Thanks for letting me have this opportunity to say, God be with you, Verne. Jerry Sharp from Naples, Florida.
Well, thank you. It's really nice. We're getting people from a long distance away participating tonight. That's good. Yes.
Mr. Crackel hired me in 1951, and I didn't work for him I replaced Mary Ann Seahausen, and she resigned, retired, or whatever, in the one building schoolhouse. And I didn't work for him too long because he was already interested and was going to go in on his but he was really a very wonderful educator, along with having a good sense of humor and making education fun as well as a main point. And he was very loyal to his teachers. If a parent would come in with some complaint or gripe, why he listened to them. He'd stick up for the teacher, but maybe an hour later, the teacher would come in to have conference with Mr. Crackel. So he was really, he was one of the finest people, I think, that ever came to Crete.
Well, I think when you teach, that's really important to have an administrator backing you like that, especially in front of parents. I think what strikes me about all this, what all of you are saying, is that this man did so much. He was so many different things. And when you think of education today and how many people work in administration of a school, how many people work in a sports department of a school, how many people work in the maintenance department of a school, any one school building almost anywhere in the country, it's amazing that one man could do all of the things that he did. Apparently so. Well, let's take a short break, okay? We're going to give you a chance to come up and look at these, and the ladies are going to pour some coffee and some cider for us, and when we come back, we'll have Joyce speak, and then we'll open it up to those of you who haven't had a chance to share a story with us, okay? I assume that you all know Mr. Crackel's daughter, Joyce. If you don't, this is Joyce Crackel Fox. You must have some personal memories.
Yes, most of the stuff has nothing to do with school. Okay. These are some things that my mother told me that I don't think very many people know. But my father's education really began with two pairs of overalls. Because when he was on the farm with all of his brothers and sisters, he was ready to quit school. Even though they were poor, they still had a lot of pride. He did not feel that he had enough clothes and could dress well enough to finish school. And some man in town said, Verne, if I give you a couple pair of overalls, will you still go to school? And he said yes. This man brought him a couple of pair of school pants. So he stayed in school. And it just goes to show you that a lot of times you don't know what you do. This man has been dead and gone years and years and years and years. But when he gave two pairs of overalls, he had no idea what he was doing and how far-reaching something like that would be. I think that's a lesson maybe for all of us. My husband and I took a trip down to Southern Illinois, where my mother and dad were born, my dad's first little school, and we did a lot of going around, taking pictures and things, and we found some people that had known my dad way back when. And we happened to find this old gentleman, and he said, oh yes, I knew Verne Crackel. And when he first started teaching, my uncle, my dad's brother, Harry, was in the classroom. Can you imagine teaching your brother in a classroom? And my father was only about 17, 18 years old at the time, and Harry was about in 8th grade. So he said he was teaching this class, and Harry was back in the back seat chewing tobacco. So my father, this comes from this old man. He said that my father kept his book in front of him and was teaching, never missed a beat, walked around, grabbed him and gave him a hit. He swallowed the tobacco. And that was the end of any problems with his brother Harry. All of this was at 17. Okay, my mother and dad's first child died. We found his birth certificate and death certificate, and it was kind of unusual to go down there, and nobody had the record of his being born or died. My sister said that there was no record, and I wish my mother had told me, yes, indeed, there was. And so I proved to them that there was, and we went and got it. My sister, Joanne, was ill. Everybody knows that. At that time, there was just simply no help at all for any kind of disadvantaged children or handicapped children. I don't know if you remember this, he would come home at lunchtime and take care of my sister because my mother was not able to lift her. By this time, she was bedridden, And so he would have to lift her. And he would come home at lunch and do that. At school, she would walk down the halls with her hand on the walls, and she would fall. Eddie, I'm sure you remember that. You know, people would bump her and she would fall, but she did go through school. She did graduate. Surely that gave him empathy with other children, because I remember I was in a store in Lockport, and somebody mentioned they had known me, and they said Joyce Crackel. And this woman that was the shoe store owner said, well, you must be Verne Crackel's daughter. And I said, yes, I am. And she had a retarded child who was an adult. And she said at the time that her daughter was trying to go to school, there was no transportation for this child. At that time, there just wasn't anybody to pick up disadvantaged children. I mean, there was nothing. You either got them to school yourself or they didn't go to school. And she said she had gone down to the courthouse and said that she wasn't able to get her child to school. And that next day and from then on, that child had somebody come to the house. And I didn't know that. I had no idea until this woman happened to tell me. I don't know, Barbara, you might remember the saying at the back of his desk, do a little bit more than you're being paid for, and soon you'll be getting paid for a little bit more than you do. And I've always remembered that, and I've always myself tried to do that, and it didn't make any difference whether I was young, old, or what, because I remember my first principal, when my father met him, he said, is she doing a good job? She better. And I was 33 years old at the time, you know. Yes, he was gone an awful lot from home. On Sundays, our trips might be going out to Monique, shagging some kids in that weren't coming to school. And that would be our Sunday afternoon ride. He'd say, let's go for a ride. Maybe he'd stop someplace, several places, and say, your child's not coming to school. I want to see him in school. And that was our recreation. He was Sunday school superintendent at the Methodist Church for as many years as I can remember. So his faith was very important to him. I remember one graduation, he was asked to speak at one of the high school graduations, and his speech was on building your house on solid rock and not sand. And I don't know if any of you remember that particular graduation, but I remember that one. Yes, he was loyal, married to the same woman for 53 years. His children and grandchildren, especially as he was getting older and failing, they were the most important things to him. In fact, that would be the first thing he'd ask, how are the children, how are the grandchildren, what are they doing, and little pictures that they would color for him and everything. That was very important to him. I'm going to mention some people that you might remember. Miss Falmer. Do you remember Miss Falmer? Okay, Miss Falmer always hated me. You know she did. And it was funny because at that time I thought Miss Falmer was, gee, she was an old lady, you know. And of course she wasn't, but I mean I thought that she was, because every 8th grade English teacher is an old lady, you know. I can say that because I'm an 8th grade English teacher, and so I tell the kids at school, well, you know, my old teacher, Miss Falmer, because you know every 8th grade teacher is an old teacher. And right after, she was over in Joliet for some reason, and she came up to the courthouse, and I had just had my first son, and my dad had said, well, Joyce just had a baby. Well, she went out and bought a present and brought it back to the courthouse and brought it to me. My dad brought it to me. That was that old teacher that didn't like me. And Miss Falmer and I corresponded until she died. Until she died. Mm-hmm. In fact, the last card that I sent her at Christmas time with a letter, her sister mailed back to me and said that she had passed away. And when I sent her pictures of the children, she would write back and say that she had put those children's pictures on her piano. Art Wolf, okay? And I tell my kids at school also, did you know that Mr. Wolf sang at the Fox wedding? And that's the truth. Because he did sing at our wedding, you know. And they always get a kick out of that, because I always have a new crop every year that, and always the name Fox and Wolf are in reading or plurals or something, you know. So I'd say, I'll tell you something that's going to be hard for you to believe, but that's the truth. Well, Art and Amy are in Minneapolis, and they are doing well. Art goes all over Europe playing his clarinet, and has played with many orchestras throughout Europe. And the last Christmas that I heard from him, just last Christmas, he said that he was playing in a band there in Minneapolis. He didn't think he'd travel as much as he used to. Hanson's, Nancy was in my wedding, but I don't hear as much from her as I do her mother. Now, Fred is dead. Fred is dead.
Velma is too.
Is Velma, okay, see, I heard from her at Christmas time, and I always get a real newsy letter from her, but it's funny how I ended up writing to her mother and father. Yeah, yes, I hear from Nancy, but not anything like that, like I hear from them. And of course, the Gaines family. You know, the Gaines family has always been bonded with our family, because when Chuck and Bonnie got married, they got married secretly. My mother and dad were the only ones that knew they were married at that particular time. Bonnie, she was a sight, you know, she was a sight. And I remember the one time that my mother told this story, that they were all sitting, I think, out on the farm, and Bonnie, my dad was trying to read his paper, and Bonnie kept messing with the paper, and finally he just picked her up and laid her in the bushes. And that's true.
Didn't say a word.
No, she just kept on until he couldn't take it anymore, and he just picked her up. Right, Chuck? Right? Okay, we talked about naming the school, and when I first started talking to him, I wrote the letter without even telling him about it, and I got a letter back from the board and said that it wasn't their thing to name a school after somebody who was still living. So we got kind of a chuckle about that, and I said, well, Dad, you got something to look forward to. You know? But, so we did laugh about that, but then it was something that we thought could happen and might happen, but probably won't happen. But anyway, I do want to just share those few things with you, and thank you all for the nice evening and for the nice things that were said, and especially for just having this. Okay, thank you.
I think we're going to hear some more nice things, because I know there's lots more people here who must have a Verne Crackel story to tell. Mrs. Lori, March.
I knew Verne Crackel many ways, and I was a student when he was principal for 12 years. I was in the first class that graduated from Warrior High School in Crete. And then I came back and taught here at Crete for 6 years, and he was my principal at that time. And for years after that, he signed my certificate every year as county superintendent when I had it registered. But, I remember so many things. He really backed his teachers. I mean, I think the ones that were teaching, and that was my first job, teaching. I think he didn't appreciate the administrator we had until we had somebody else. Or if someone said they taught first under a bad administrator, and you could really know the difference. He was the reason I came back to teach in Crete. My senior year in college, I had sent out some resumes, and he had told me the summer before that when you finish, there's a job here if you want it. I said, well, I really didn't care to come back to Crete. I mean, after all 4 years of college, I wanted to go to another place. But he said, well, it's there. So that my senior year, I sent off some resumes. And there were a few jobs I was considering. And I went to talk to Miss Harrison, who was our critic teacher there at the college. And she said, you're thinking about these. She said, remember, you know Mr. Crackel in Crete. She said, these other schools, you don't know what the administrators are. And it was during the war. She said, many of them are gone, and you have administrators that don't know much about administrating. And that's rough on a first-year teacher. I said, you know Mr. Crackel is good. I said, well, how do you know that? You've never met him. She said, I've seen you work. She said, I've seen you start projects, I've seen you finish projects. And anybody who works like that has to come from a system where that was instilled in them. And I thought, my goodness, Dr. Martin's Crackel on us and we don't even know it. But that was the reason I came back to Crete to teach. As a student, one thing I remember when I was taking high school, I think it was Algebra 2 and Trigonometry and those courses, Mr. Crackel was a teacher. He taught us in that big study hall, remember that great big study hall? And we were about 10 or 12 in the class. And we had the first seats near the door. And he taught our class. He ran that whole study hall. He also took care of any salesman or anybody else that came into the building. And we did fine.
He turned out some good teachers. He really did. I had Mrs. Laurie for a teacher. I also had Miss Croyson for a teacher. And his mark definitely is on you. Very good teachers. Yes, Mr. Laurie, Everett.
I've got a rich founding. I can tell a couple things about Verne. My wife and I went down in South Texas, right on the Mexican border. And about one of the first years I was down there, one afternoon I went out to the golf course and was on the driving range. And a fellow hitting balls alongside of me. And we kind of struck up a conversation when we were hitting balls. And one thing led to another. And he told me he was from Joliet. And I said, well, I live in Crete. And I tried to figure out who were some people in Joliet that I might know and things like that. And we did. I just didn't come across anybody. I said, you have no Verne Crackel. His face lit up like that. He's the greatest man I ever knew. Just out of the clear blue sky. I never met the gentleman before. Another story about Verne. When my wife was teaching, a bunch of us husbands of the teachers we used to get together and play Penny Ante, and Verne used to come and sit in with us quite often. And I don't know if many of you know Ginny Frink, who used to teach in the system here at that time. And Mark would say, well, we're going to have a prayer meeting tonight. And when we have the meeting, you know, and when we had the whole little Penny Ante poker session. And Ginny Frink asked me, what goes on? He says, you know, when every 2 weeks, these husbands get together and have a prayer meeting. They must really be religious. Well, one other thing, I thought, I played basketball under Verne. Penny and I were on the same team. Margie's sister was here the other night. We just went through the system here. And we were talking about high school, and we said, well, where did kids go from Moni before there was pre-Moni units? Well, Moni had a high school at that time, in 33, 34. Remember, Kenny, we played basketball. There was a fairgrounds in Moni, on the east side of Moni, and with a dance hall. And we used to play basketball in the dance hall. And if you wanted to shoot a layup shot, you'd dribble about the free throw line, and you just set your feet, and you would just slide all the way up. Verne transported us all over, basketball, baseball, whatever. I don't think he ever got a penny for taking people. I remember one time we were playing ball at Beecher, and I played shortstop. And he used to kind of delight hitting the ball a little harder than me and see if I could handle it. You know? And one time he was hitting that ball and it hit a pebble or a rock or something, and smacked me right in the nose. terrific, I got a terrific bloody nose out of it. But I didn't get any sympathy out of it. It just hit him just as hard as well.
Kenny, do you want to add to those stories about?
Well, the other one I can remember, we used to have to go to the house every once in a while, and we would be waiting for a ride to school, all those kids, you know. And a couple of us walk over to school up there over John Ruffin, and here he'd be doing dishes. He was to bring one for all of his wife to the dishes. We know that would be kind of a talk piece for the guy.
Talk piece, yeah. That's what you call a real role model. Jean, did you work with him? Or go to school under him? Or both? Both.
He was one of my favorite men in the whole world.
He was.
I came to town to go to 8th grade, and it was at the time when we were in the park hall, and he was teaching 7th and 8th grade. And it was a real treat for me. I thought he was a wonderful teacher. And then after I got out of high school and couldn't go away to school, I went over here and took a couple of classes, and I was his secretary. I called that. I mean, I don't think we even had a typewriter, but I guess I ran errands and answered the telephone. But I do count that one of my 25 years as an educational secretary. And, then I used to babysit when he lived in John Ruffin's house. And then I grew up when he was married. Then he used to meet through church affiliation, and he went to lodge with my dad, and went to Lions Club with her, and that sort of thing. And one year we each had a baby girl, and we named her Judy.
Oh, yes. Everybody had one that year. Yes, everybody had. We had a nice picnic.
That's right.
The last time I saw Mr. Crackel, I was still working over here, and I belonged to Will County Educational Secretaries, and we had a dinner guest night, and I took my present at that time, principal, who was Dr. Slabaugh, who's here now, and Mr. Crackel. And it was just an enjoyable evening.
I'll bet. Who else has got a story? Ken?
Question here is, did he replace Mr. Rival?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get the record straight, who was here before.
Now, when Mr. Crackel was here, he served as principal and also as superintendent of schools.
I don't think
Was
it
that
was a super. Burned in 28, and Crackel and Rival left. It burned in June of 1928, and your dad came to me and came to a burned out. Laverne wasn't very old when they parked in the town hall. Laverne was only a couple of years old when they came.
Is that picture of him on this one?
Well, the school burned at Christmas, right after school was out in 1928, the same year Grandpa Helm died.
I don't think that's right.
Do you think it was 29?
I think it was 27.
Ray? We have an expert sitting in the back here. What year did the school burn?
28. Joanne was 28. Thanks, Ray.
I thought it was 1927.
27.
Ray and I think 28. Well, Jean was in that first class when the
It was 28 because I was the last class that graduated. I have to admit to graduating in 28.
Okay. Yeah, I was trying to
Yeah, and we graduated and then it worked.
Did you have right? Did you have him then when you were in high school? You had him at the
We went through.
You went
right
through.
after Jean was 28.
So it was 28.
The fire started out. Almost as all up. It was early in the morning, at 3 o'clock. Pop said, my God, kids, get up and come and look at this. We're losing in school. Well, we were happy. Cares if your school burns down, you tend to it.
That's the time when we really don't mind
that
that.
way. And back from it was, we were in the town hall. I went to the park. Yeah.
No, we can tell who's older here. The older students went to the park and the younger people went to the town hall, right?
And this is the rag newspaper now. The word was that Mr. Rival was being fired because we couldn't have given him the products were given Verne, and that he set the school on fire because he was mad because they fired him. That was my problem.
Never heard that.
He sounds like an interesting gentleman. Everett.
One other thought I had, and
He was principal of school.
I commented to people every once in a while run across. A year ago, we sat in here and talked about Hans Plaza. And I keep telling people, if we had Hans Plaza as police chief and Verne Crackel the superintendent of the schools, we'd really have it made.
You know, they lived in a different time, and I don't know that they could have handled things today the way they did then. But I think people like that would have found a way to handle today's problems better than some of the current people do handle them. Florence?
I was going to say that as one of the teachers under Verne Crackel, we had better be at all the basketball games and any football games.
Is that right, Florence?
What?
You had to attend all
Oh,
of
yes,
these?
absolutely.
I didn't know that.
He did not, he just said, you are urged to attend, and you are there. You better be there. There was no question.
Yeah, I work for a principal like that today. He's very persuasive when he urges us to do something, like attend extracurricular activities.
Florence was mentioning the basketball games and the football games, and PTA I remember too.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't think of nothing. But also there were all other little things that teachers now must have extra pay for and so forth. That under Mr. Crackel, we just assumed that was part of the job. We took tickets of basketball games or anything like that. He just said, we need a couple people, and they were always there.
Well, and you commented, all of you, on him driving kids all over. Mileage was unheard of in those days. You didn't get mileage, not like today. Marianne?
I wish my brother John was here because he had a couple stories to tell, and I think Eddie was in his grade group, something was so. But he was telling us about he was on a committee, well, I don't know really a committee, but he planned their prom, and they decided they wanted to have a prom in the gym, like everybody else did. So one day they went in the office, they asked Mr. Crackel if they could do it for school. So he told me up, so there was Huntsman and I think Jacob and John. And they were there and they're busy on the telephone. And so Mr. Crackel came in after a little bit and was still on the telephone. So he said, you know, fellas, he said, you're in here, what are you doing here? Well, they were calling Chicago to get Lou Breeze's orchestra. And he's in charge. So Mr. Crazy said he just took this phone, took that phone and put it down, and he said, you'll have your prom in a gym just like everybody else. He said, well, they want to have something different. Lou Breeze's orchestra, no fire or nothing. But here in town, and I asked him to come tonight, and I see if they were running late, I don't know, because it was really funny. They go and make me
How about some of you people on this side? I know Dad, I know you had him as a teacher. Waylon, did you have him too? No, you didn't have him. Tony, you had him as a teacher.
Oh, yeah. Well, in our class, we were, going down to the high school, you know, these classes were small down there, you know, in fact, I don't recollect right now if I could come across any of the ones that went to school.
Well, I noticed when you guys were looking at some of these pictures and talking about who were in the pictures, and you were commenting on how many people had died. Some of those classes aren't with us anymore. And it's interesting that the memories of Mr. Crackel are so vivid with all of you. I mean, it's like you just had him yesterday, or you just worked for him yesterday. Barbara was mentioning during the break that you ran across him in other capacities later on, not just working for him as a beginning teacher.
Oh, right, many times. In fact, as late as Well, at that time, he was back from Springfield and he was working as a student teacher at Lewis College. And our school was undergoing one of those North Central evaluations. And I was the lucky person that got stuck with that. And Lynn Wiley came and Verne Crackel came. So I kind of brought Crete in to evaluate.
Yeah.
But it was fun for me because I had a real opportunity to get to know him all over again.
And it's from a different perspective, then, I think. Especially when you're not a beginning teacher anymore. Mr.
How old was your dad?
He was about 84. About 84.
Yes, because we were there when he was celebrating his 80th birthday.
And when did he die? Well, then it was like 5 years ago.
He died, yeah, he died in 84.
Yeah, they were 4 years ago then.
Yeah.
It's been 4 years ago.
Because in 1984, we saw him, and he had the most beautiful home, nursing home deal, but he ate and stuff there. And Laverne had called him. We had called the guest and asked if we could see him. We were on our way back from Florida. And it was like I'd never been away from him.
We've got pictures of that.
Hey, Don, and
We've got pictures, Winnie. You've got the pictures of that.
Yeah.
We took pictures of it.
he just couldn't get over, and you went way out of your way to see him. He was just like, didn't hurt.
Well, didn't you guys call him too at one of the reunions? Right.
We celebrated our
Right.
50th, 8th grade reunion, class reunion. And we asked you to come out, we got a letter, and I got a letter back from Dolhite.
Dolhite, right.
Dolhite.
Right.
And they couldn't make it, but we enjoyed that.
What year was
We got,
that?
83.
But I don't know very many people that have gone to school in a one building from first grade to high school. You know, the one end of the building was the high school and this end was the grade school. You know, and that was up until 53.
I take the 4th grade classes from Crete Elementary on historical walk around town every fall, and that's one of the things that just boggles the mind of these 4th grade students, that you started your career at one end of the building and you ended it at the other, that you stayed all in the same complex. They can't believe it. They really can't believe it.
I didn't know the world was any bigger than that. I really didn't.
We've heard lots of student stories tonight and fellow teachers and everything. Glenn, have you got any good father-in-law stories?
No, as far as any good father-in-law stories, he was just the greatest person to ever be around. We very enjoyed being together. When we first met Joyce, I rarely saw him other than on the weekend because he was out every night of the week. He had a meeting here, a meeting there, visiting different people. And so as I said, we did get together on weekends.
But he was afraid to ask my father for my hand in marriage.
Very difficult thing.
So he was, we waited this night, and I said, you better, tonight, because we all had these plans, And so he said, oh, well, let him go to bed. And then my dad was in bed, and he said, I better do it tonight. I'll never be able to do it another time. So we got him out of bed, brought him back down again, and said, we're going to get married.
And I think one of the first questions that they had, or you had mentioned, the things that you had mentioned is, well, is your car paid for? You?
Yeah.
And that was the main thing. Once they found out the car was paid for, they found okay.
That's great. That's really good. Ken?
I have one picture here of 1930, and I think looking at this class, well, it's a basketball team. I think, if I look at it, right, there's only one person on here that is good.
Really?
Who's that was? And that was the 1930, the coaching basketball. Jimmy Cole, Johnny Littrell, Lloyd Grimm, George Sharp, Clarence Grimm, my brother Butch, and of course two of his tab.
He lived in Stater. He's married to a Joan.
I love all these nicknames. I mean, I grew up with all these nicknames, and for years I didn't know that people have real names. I thought those were their real names.
Well, I could expound on that. I've got a list of them. I did a class reunion of the first 10 years in Lincolnshire a few years ago, and I brought the list. I must have about 75 nicknames.
I believe you. You should share that with us at some meeting. That would be fun.
I'll have to update that. I just remember one tonight, and we was looking at the pictures, and I forgot about it. It was Richie Ron. His nickname was Bow Wow.
And Buster Week?
Buster Week. Butch Marion, Two Good Stabbing. I'm Lord. But I've got a whole list of them. I should bring them.
That is a fun thing.
Yeah, it is.
I did it, what was that, about 3-4 years ago?
Yeah, when I had the 10-year.
And I got some new ones from there.
No, that's really, you didn't know they had other names. Those names just stuck so tight to people, even after they became adults.
Well, the whole Kale family, I think all the boys had a nickname. Gary's name was changed to, probably a lot of the older ones remember Sugar, if you right over here in this building, where he was a soda jerk, and it was written. But it's not unusual for almost everyone to have a nickname. Even Ray Peavering had one, but I'm not going to tell you.
We'll save that for another meeting, okay? Is there anybody who'd like to share something with us that I've neglected to call on, overlooked here? Leah, right?
My husband was saying he and Freddie Hansen were rolling corn silk cigarettes in the Crackel garage just after dark. I'm really trying to puff on those away, and here comes the car. And Verne just backed up and let him go. Didn't say a word. Of course, Fred's dad was president of school board.
Let's see. Crackles lived on the corner, and Hansons were across the street and down a couple houses. Yeah, brick house. Yeah. I used to cut through Hanson's yard on my way to school in the morning. Anybody else? Mr. Gaines, Tony.
I've got one here I didn't tell, but I was holding back on it a little bit.
Oh, come on, tell
We'll get the good ones.
Then we'll get the good ones, yeah.
The old, when they first started the second year high school, the room in the back, the room that for shelter, study hall was.
Portable building.
Yeah, the portable. Anyway, you walked into it from the gym, you walked in there, and then there was a doorway, and there's a bunch of guys on each, on each side. There's here was dividing line, let's say. So, Mr. Crackel opened the door suddenly, and here was this one fellow holding a paper wad in his hand, and he did smell Hartman. And Mr. Crackel walked in, and he went over, and he liked jerking him, so he got a hold of me, jerked him, he said, the next time I catch you doing this, I'm going to knock the snot right out of your nose.
I think so, yeah.
This would be a great one. He'd always walk down the hall, and you could look at the door, and he'd be looking at the window.
What?
Always kind of sneaking up on you. A lot of times, we had a couple of brothers, and this one was little Woodrow Reed. He was doing something, and I don't know, but Mr. Crackel just opened the door, come in, and he took his hand like this, and jerked the kid out of his seat, and he just shook him a couple of times, and that's all. Set him down, and now they walk out of the room, and boy, I tell you, you should have brought anything that way. first. Because he was that way, he was always looking, he was always kind of careful, looking in that door, the glass pane, he might be there.
Times really have changed a lot in terms of that, but, you know, you've got some respect from your students.
That's half our discipline in school, because the teachers can't do anything. They even talk to them bad. The parents are coming, they got a lawsuit.
But that was one thing about Mr. Crackel in the school. He was always in the hall. Every student knew him, and he knew every student.
On the soccer field, the baseball field, he was one of the kids. I mean, he played with the kids.
He did. I mean, he actually played with you. He didn't coach you. I mean, he was honestly out there playing too. Was he a good athlete?
I remember they called him Blackjack Crackel. I remember that.
Yeah. Blackjack Crackel, okay.
He used to play basketball with the CAC, and he had an habit of pushing occasionally.
Oh, yeah.
And he knew he was going to get a foul, but he was having such a good time.
Is that where they got the snap, crackle, and pop?
Charles, you didn't have him as a teacher, did you? Or did you? No, Charles Seehausen.
Yeah, I came to Crete my last 2 years. I think what you can say about Mr. Crackel, he was a dedicated person. Like I said, everybody knew him, and he knew everybody. The one thing that sticks in my mind is I wasn't a very good student. I was having problems. I was playing basketball. I was failing in physics. And I was walking down the hall, and Mr. Crackel said to me, he says, you know, you only get out of life what you put in. That's nothing.
Now, Marion worked for him?
Yeah.
She was what, the school secretary? See, I didn't know that.
I want to tell one story about when Marion was working for him. I was teaching, and he said Mr. Crackel was very persuasive. He persuaded me to take an extra class from him. And I didn't have much time for, free periods or anything. And the time that I had free, there was no, this was the time when we had a lot of classes, and anyhow, the faculty room, there was no such thing as a faculty room at the time. We just had our own room. And my room was taken at the time I had some free time. And he said, that's all right, just come in the office here. And often I'd work at his desk. He'd go out someplace. So he was busy that day. And sometimes I'd share Marion's desk and I'd work there. Well, I wanted to type one time, and I asked her if she was going to use a typewriter. She said no. I said, okay. So I moved the chair around so she could work there, and I could work here. I'm listening. So what's going on? Why is everybody leaving the school? Everybody's going on. Mr. President, why'd you ring the fire bell? My chair was back against the little button.
There's one of those pictures up there that you can see the button.
Really?
Yeah, right. Someone's
right
got
at
the
the
picture.
bottom
You
of
can
that
see the
box.
button right behind it.
Well, Marge, I remember you teaching math in that little annex, that little portable building.
Oh, that little portable building.
Yeah.
By the way, when you talk about
Yeah.
school finance,
Yeah.
we got our money's worth out of that
Yeah,
building.
You taught math there, because I had you for
Right.
math out there.
There were 3 classrooms at that time.
Right. And then they made it into a cafeteria, like?
In a band room? It was a band room.
Choir room? We had choir out.
What kind of a portable building?
Wasn't it a shop too?
Oh, yes. Originally, I think it
It was on the east side of
It was kind of neat going outside. It was, yeah, right, you had to go outside, yeah. It was kind of neat.
You remember it too?
Oh, yeah.
I taught geometry in that room, in the 3rd room in that building. And I remember standing there one day trying to explain lines and planes, and I said, a plane is a flat surface like this wall. And I looked down that wall.
Mr. Gaines, have you got anything to share with us?
No, Crackel is not the other night teacher. Our first principal, 7th and 8th grade, was Miss Wilson. She was a very nice teacher. Miss Wilson. And after that was B.B. Wood. And then Mr. Riley. And then Verne Crackel.
Who followed Mr. Crackel? Mr. Wiley. Do you want to have a look?
I wish Ann were here.
I know.
So I could say that, excuse me, one thing that I think, he was a very patient man. And I remember Luella Bowen and I were discussing him one time, and she said, you know, Earl says that some of those teachers can come flying into his office so angry. He'll close the door, and first thing you know, they'll come out smiling as sweet as And I think that says something for him.
That says a lot.
He's a good administrator when he can do that.
That's right. That says a lot.
I know we're honoring Verne, but I think we ought to mention Mildred too. Because you can't have a good man without a good woman, can you? That's right. That's true. And Mildred was a good person to be with Verne because she held up her end and she played cards with us and visited with us and always was willing to help him and do what he wanted. She didn't enjoy the best of health either, but a lot of us don't. But I would say he needed her and she needed him, and the whole thing was a good combination.
Because
And I admire Mildred too.
I mean, she had a lot because he was gone all the time. That unit district, when they were doing that, he was gone every single night.
And she had the care of Joanne. I can remember when Joanne first was ill, and Verne would come bring her to school, and Mary, and you want to remember this because you and I would run out there and hold the door open. Your dad would carry her into the school, and she was heavy. I mean, her illness caused her to be heavy. But Mildred stuck right in there too, and even I remember going to visit them when they lived in Joliet. Had that pretty house on Richard Street or in that area there. And so I think along with Verne, we got
She had to take up a lot, you know, of the home, you know, because he wasn't there.
I give Crackel, or I say that she was what started me in business in Crete. Because when I was working in Chicago Heights, she came to me one day and she told me, she said, that was Margie Smith going to retire. She said, why don't you come and open beauty shop in Crete we can use one? And I told her, wait, yes, because my boss and I were having a little personality conflict at the time. And so I came and I opened up the beauty shop in Crete on the corner of Cass and Main. And it was all due to her because she kind of told me to come out here.
Joyce, are you the only teacher in the family? No, my sister Judy teaches also. Sister Judy, my sister Judy, she has the little ones. She has the little second graders, and I have the big ones.
She still teaches?
Yeah, she does. And you teach 8th grade English. Yeah, like all old 8th grade English teachers. Right. Yeah. Yeah, like I tell my kids all the time. It takes a lot to be a teacher, especially today, I think. I see about 200 a day.
Do you see a big difference from when you started, Joyce?
Yeah. Some years better, some years worse. 8th graders are very interesting. They are. I like them. Okay, people. If I can't get you to come forth with any more little juicy tidbits here, we will begin to break things up here. We want you to feel free to stay around and chat some more. I know some of you haven't seen each other in a long, long time. It was nice for me to see some people tonight that I haven't seen in a long time, but nice for me to see the Foxes again. I met them for the first time, 2 years ago? They came to my house for a meeting to talk about naming something after Verne Crackel and the Historical Society's part in it. And so far, there have been no success stories. In fact, the school district has
taken the name Hubbard Trail off of the junior high, and it's now called Crete Junior High at the present time. And that was the only historical connected name on any of the buildings in the district. But we're hopeful that at some point in time, something in the district is going to be named after Mr. Crackel, and we're not going to give up and let it die. We're going to keep working little by little. I will add that the officials of the school district and the school board members were specifically invited to come to this evening, and they did not come. So our campaign will go on. I thank all of you for your input. I feel that tonight was as good or better than last year with Hans Clausen night. It's just really enjoyable to hear all the reminiscences and to learn about these people. And for those of us who didn't know them or didn't have them as a teacher, it's really enlightening to hear about them. We're going to do it again next October. We haven't exactly pinpointed who the person will be, but we hope you'll all mark your calendar for October and look for our program. And again, we'll be on one individual. We've still got coffee and cider in the kitchen and some goodies on the table there. These are the pictures that Joyce brought with her, and this is Jean Baker Hotan's album here, and there's a great picture of Mr. Crackel, and Kenny Meering has some delightful pictures there too, if you haven't seen Kenny's. Yes?
Does someone have my report card? First grade report card.
All right. Who's got it?
Someone put it in there?
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay.
possible. I didn't.
All right.
Yes, it is.
It's a treasure, and we can't afford to lose the treasures.
I didn't get drafted out of first grade.
Well, I noticed Mr. Newton was brave enough to bring his report card. None of the rest of you did that, so I don't know.
We were inspired by that.